I decided to spend 1 year in Stardew Valley to see just how much progress I could actually make. This was honestly a way bigger challenge than I thought it would be, as I tried to play every single day out as long as I could. Now, some of the major things I actually wanted to get accomplished in the game was complete the community center, earn over 500,000 gold, and try to at least make my farm look half decent. This video has taken well over 60 hours to both record and edit, so I really hope you do enjoy. Anyways, that's enough rambling, let's get into it. First thing is I got straight to work clearing a little area to plant my parsnip seeds, and then spent the rest of the day foraging and getting to know a few of the local people. On day 2, I used most of my energy to water my crops, and then headed down to the beach to get the fishing rod from Willie. I ended up stumbling upon an artifact that was on the beach, and so I donated it to the museum. Later that day, I ran into this cute girl that was drawing at the end of a dock. I went over and gave her a flower I'd found from foraging. On day 3, I woke up to the sound of rain, and since I didn't have to water my crops, I spent the morning clearing some trees. I then spent the rest of the day fishing, along with completing a quest for Marnie, which she gave me 90 gold for. On day 4, I spent the morning watering plants and clearing a few trees. And later in the evening, the same girl I gave the flower to the other day came and did some drawing next to me. I found out her name is Leah, and that she loves spending time outdoors. On day 5, Marnie knocked on my door and asked if I wanted to adopt a dog, which I obviously refused. I'm kidding. Anyways, after that it was time for my first harvest, which I sold for a whopping 1,500 gold. I then used that money to buy a backpack upgrade along with another 43 parsnip seeds. I then spent the rest of the day going as deep as I could in the mines, and I was able to make it all the way down to about level 8 before I ran out of energy. Day 6, it was raining again, so I went and sold some of the things that I had foraged and used that money to buy some more parsnip seeds. I spent the rest of the day clearing some trees and doing a little foraging. On day 7, I harvested the rest of the parsnips that I had grown, and then Lewis gave me a tour of the old community center in town. I then bought a few different seeds that I was going to need for the spring crops bundle, and then caught a few herring for a mission I had picked up. Later that afternoon, I got some carrot seeds from Lewis and did a little foraging to wrap up my first week in Stardew Valley. On day 8, I watered all my crops and then ran into a mysterious man with purple hair. He gave me a little bit of his green soup, and then I just seen trees and grass, so it's probably fine though. I then did a little foraging and was able to complete my first bundle. Day 9, most of my parsnips were grown. After harvesting them, I headed off and did some mining. They would make it to about level 15 before calling it a night. I spent days 10 through 12 fishing. Like, I'm talking almost nothing but fishing. My goal was to try to make enough money to buy a decent amount of strawberry seeds before the egg festival. Day 13 was the day of the egg festival. I was able to buy about 80 strawberry seeds, and then I absolutely destroyed a bunch of kids in an egg hunt. Why they let me play is beyond me. After the festival, I tried to get all my seeds planted, but I ended up passing out before I could do so. Day 14, I watered all my plants, and then spent the rest of the day just fishing. I spent the days 15 and 16 down in the mines. I was getting pretty sick of having to water everything by hand. I was able to gather a decent amount of copper, and then I was able to make it down to about level 30. On day 17, I donated some things to the museum, and then spent the rest of the day looking for berries, which I found quite a lot of. Day 18, I spent the morning doing some watering and a little bit of clearing before heading off into the mines again. I didn't have the best of luck, and I only made it to level 35. On day 19, I watered all of my strawberries and went to the community center to complete the spring crops bundle. I then spent the rest of the afternoon fishing, and that evening, I read a book. Wow! And then I went to bed. On day 20, I harvested a bunch of my spring seeds that had grown, and then spent the rest of the day working my way down to level 45 in the mines. Day 21 was my first strawberry harvest. After harvesting them, I donated a few things to the museum, and then I dropped off my axe at Clint's to get it upgraded. I finished the day off by doing a little fishing, while Leah did some drawing next to me. On day 22, the rest of my spring seeds had grown, along with the other half of my strawberries. I then spent the rest of the day down in the mines. On day 23, I spent the morning smelting some ores, and then headed off to pick up my axe. I then dropped off my pickaxe to get it upgraded as well, along with donating a few things to the museum. On day 24, I watered my strawberry plants before dropping off some items at the community center. I then headed down to the flower dance that was happening and got absolutely rejected by Leah. So I just awkwardly stood there while she danced with some guy named Elliot. I then went home and cried myself to sleep. On day 25, it was time for another strawberry harvest, and my pickaxe was ready to be picked up. I then dropped off my axe to get it upgraded again. I then spent the rest of the evening doing a little bit of clearing in preparation for the summer crops I was going to be planting. Day 26 was my final strawberry harvest. I then headed into town and completed a mission for Evelyn before heading off for a full day of mining. On day 27, since my crops were done for the season, I headed off to pick up my axe from Clint, along with processing a few geodes. I then stopped by Leah's place, where I convinced her to do an art show in town before heading off for another long day in the mines. I was able to make it down to about level 60 before calling it a night. The morning of day 28 was spent doing a little reorganizing around the farm, and then heading off to do some more mining. My luck was unfortunately really bad, and I only made it down to level 67. I then headed home and went to bed, which concluded my first month in Stardew Valley. On the first day of summer, I started off by planting my starfruit seed and then doing a little clearing. I then headed off to buy a bunch of blueberry seeds and a few other seeds I was going to need for the summer crops bundle. I spent the rest of the day working on the layout of my crops and sprinklers. I then rushed to try to get all of my seeds planted and watered, but ended up passing out 2 feet from my bed. On day 30, I finished the layout of my sprinklers and planted the rest of my seeds. I then went into town to buy some more seeds and then went into the secret forest to catch a wood skip. On day 31, I watered all my crops and then dove into the mines to try and reach level 80. I ended up making it down to level 81 before I called it a night. On day 323, wait a minute. Oh, I apparently typed that wrong in this script. Well, anyways, on day 323, I watered my crops, and then I dropped off a few things at the community center. I then headed into the mines to finally get myself some gold ore. After mining the whole day, I was able to get myself about 40 pieces of gold, which was honestly not that great. On day 33, I woke up excitedly because it was going to be one of my last days having to water everything by hand. I made as many sprinklers as I could, and then headed off to the community center to complete the blacksmith's bundle. I then headed off to the mines in search of some copper, so I could build some more furnaces. Day 34, I worked on making my furnace area look a little nicer, and then headed off to the mines in search of some gold, which I honestly didn't find a whole lot of. On day 35, I built almost all of the sprinklers I was going to need, and then headed off to the community center where I was able to complete the geologist bundle, which also happened to be my first fully complete room. I then spent the rest of the afternoon fishing, along with heading to the mines to pick up the rest of the gold I was going to need for my sprinklers. On day 36, I headed over to Clint's to crack open a bunch of geodes I had found down in the mines, and then went to the museum to donate a bunch of the minerals I had also gathered. I then headed down to the beach and tried to catch myself a pufferfish. There, good grief. Which I wasn't able to do. On day 37, I went down to the beach again to catch myself a pufferfish. Pufferfish. Why is that so hard for me to say? Anyways, I was, again, unsuccessful in doing that. I then dropped my pickaxe off at Clint's for an upgrade and spent the rest of the day doing some clearing around the house. Day 38, I was up bright and early trying to yet again catch a pufferfish, which I was finally able to get. I immediately headed up to the community center to drop it off. I then headed back down to the beach to do some more fishing, and totally not because Leah was doing a drawing of the ocean. Guys, I'm here to fish. On day 39, I dropped off a few things at the community center and then headed down to the beach for the Lua. Ooh. I don't know, something like that. Anyways, there's a party at the beach, and I was gonna go. I wasn't sure what to add to the stew, so I just threw a poppy I had in, and to my surprise, the governor seemed quite pleased, so I'll count that as an absolute win. On day 40, I headed over to Clint's to pick up my pickaxe, and then I decided to head down into the mine. And really, without even trying, I ended up spending my entire day down there. On day 41, I spent the morning getting a few things to take to the community center, along with struggling to catch a catfish in the secret forest. I then headed down to the beach to catch a red snapper. After that, I headed up to the community center where I dropped off a bunch of different things I was going to need for a couple of different bundles. I then headed into the mines to try and complete a mission for the wizard, which he gave me 500 gold for. Day 42 was my first melon harvest. After I harvested them, I wasn't sure whether to plant corn or if I should just replant melons, but in the end, I ended up going with melons. I then went and dropped off a few things at the community center, and after planting my melons, decided to call it an early night. On day 43, I woke up to green rain. I was honestly really confused, but there were blueberries to be picked, which is what I spent my morning doing. I then dropped off a few things at the community center and went and visited everybody who were apparently all hiding out in the saloon. I honestly don't really know what this green rain is. I think it's new, but some of these trees sure looked funky, I'm not gonna lie. Day 44, I headed off to buy a pomegranate and an apple tree, along with a couple of wheat seeds. After planting my 2 fruit trees, I headed off to the lake in hopes of catching a sturgeon, which I was able to do. On day 45, I completed the exotic foraging bundle and then headed down to the beach, where I repaired the old bridge. I then spent the rest of the day fishing, and then quickly dropped off some corn I had to complete the quality crops bundle. On day 46, I spent the morning doing some clearing around the house, and then I spent the afternoon doing a little bit more clearing, and well, I ended up spending the entire day just clearing trees and rocks. What fun. On day 47, it was time for another blueberry harvest. I then did a little bit of work in my machines area, along with creating a couple more preserves jars. I then spent the rest of the day clearing and working on a little tree farm. Day 48 was the first day of the trout derby, and there were a couple of prizes that I was hoping to get. I ended up spending pretty much the entire day fishing. Day 49 was the second day of the trout derby, and it honestly went terrible. It ended up going so bad that by lunchtime, I just gave up. However, near the end of the day, I went and completed the vault in the community center, which meant that the bus was now unlocked. On day 50, I decided to get on the bus and head to Calico Desert. I picked up a few coconuts, and then after looking around, I just left and completely forgot to catch myself a sandfish. I then headed up to the robins to get to work on building a coop. I then headed down to the mines to fetch myself some more iron. On day 51, it was yet again time for another blueberry harvest. And let me tell you, It never gets old picking this many blueberries. After a rather bountiful harvest, I headed into town and completed the artisan bundle. I then spent the rest of the day doing some more clearing around the house. On day 52, I was actually able to get pretty much everything cleared. The entire top left corner of my farm was entirely cleared, which was honestly really nice. I then headed down to the beach and spent the rest of the day fishing. On day 53, I woke up and fertilized the trees for my tree farm, and then headed into town to process a few geodes and drop off a few things in the museum. I then started work on building a barn for a few animals I was hoping to get, and that afternoon, I made the layout of the second crop area I was hoping to build. On day 54, most of my melons were ready to be harvested, along with a few coffee beans. I then jumped on the bus and headed to the desert to catch a sandfish, which didn't take hardly any time at all. After I got back, I headed to the community center and completed the specialty fishing bundle. Day 55, I headed into the mines to collect some gold I was going to need for some more sprinklers I was hoping to build. I ended up spending the entire day down there, but I got pretty much all of the gold that I was going to need. Day 56, I had a decent amount of stuff I wanted to get done to get ready for fall. Not really. Honestly, the biggest thing I wanted to do was just get all the sprinklers I was going to need, and I pretty much just spent the whole day smelting different ores and then heading down to the beach to watch the moonlight jellies. I went and joined Leah at the end of the dock, and we paid our respects to the final moments of summer. I then watched as some rather beautiful creatures danced along the shoreline, closing the final moments of summer. On day 57, I spent the morning clearing all of my old crops and getting everything ready for planting. I then headed into town and bought a bunch of seeds. I spent the rest of the afternoon watering and planting everything, and it didn't take long for me to realize that I had completely miscalculated and hadn't gotten near enough seeds. Day 58, I went to the community center and completed the river fish bundle, and then stopped by at Pierre's to buy some more seeds. I went back home and got everything planted. On day 59, I headed down to the mines to gather a few resources and kind of lost track of time, before realizing that Leah was having an art show in town from 3 to 5, and I was just able to make it there in time. After the art show, I headed up to Robin's and got a barn upgrade. On day 60, I got a letter from Leah, who seemed to be quite happy with the success of her art show. I spent the morning harvesting some corn, and then headed up to the community center to complete the fall foraging bundle. I then bought the final backpack upgrade along with completing a mission for Sam. After that, I went and caught a walleye, which was the final fish I needed for the fishing bundles. On day 61, I went down to the traveling cart and bought a large milk and a large goat's milk. I then headed up to Robin's to get a coop upgrade. I then headed down into the mines and made my way all the way down to level 100 before calling it a night. Day 62, I went to the mines and then made it down to level 105 and then headed off to Clint's to open some geodes. I then went to Pierre's and bought a bouquet that I planned on giving to a special someone. Day 63 was a pretty big day. I headed down to Leah's place and I gave her the bouquet, which she gladly accepted. I then headed up to the mines to gather some gold and ended up getting quite a bit. On day 64, I spent the morning gathering a few blackberries, then went to Robin's to build a silo. After that, I headed down to the forest and helped Leah pick some fruit. I then went to buy some animals, but no one was there, so I just went back home. Day 65, I headed into town and completed the field research bundle, and then went and bought a duck, who I named Quack. I then did a little more work to my tree farm, along with doing a little more clearing. Day 66, I reorganized my chests, and then gathered some hay for my animals. I then spent some time cleaning up Cindersap Forest, and then headed into the mines to get myself some stone. On day 67, I made myself a fried egg, and then a maki roll for the chef's bundle. I gathered a few blackberries, and added a few light sources around the farm. On day 68, I harvested a few crops, and then headed down to the traveling cart, where I bought a duck feather. I then headed down in the mines to gather some more stone. On day 69, I made a little area for some recycling machines, and set a few crab pots that I had lying around. I then headed down into the mines to get myself some iron. Day 70 was my first pumpkin harvest. I used a lot of the gold quality pumpkins to complete a quest I had taken for Pierre, and then bought some more seeds to replant. I then headed up to the community center and completed the fall crops bundle. I then went to Robin's to get another barn upgrade. Day 71, I spent the morning harvesting corn along with the other half of my pumpkins. I then headed into town and took a community cleanup quest for Linus, and then spent the rest of the afternoon fishing trash out of my little pond. On day 72, I got to harvest some corn, and then I headed into town for the fair. I set up my display, and then after winning a few tokens, tried my luck at the spinning wheel, which I ended up losing all of my tokens on, multiple times. So I spent a majority of my time shooting targets until I had enough to buy the star fruit. I then packed up my display and headed home. On day 73, I harvested a few pumpkins, and then headed into town to complete the fodders bundle. I then was able to win a pretty cool hat from Lewis. I then went and bought a pig that I named Snooty, and a sheep named Baba. Trust me, I really put some time into what I thought I should name those animals. Towards the afternoon, I went on a picnic with Leah, and then out of seemingly nowhere, her ex-boyfriend showed up. So I did the only logical thing I could think of and socked him in the face. It was a great time. I then headed into the mines and spent the rest of the day blowing up rocks. On day 74, I cracked open a few geodes, and then went to Robin's to get another coop upgrade. Day 75, I harvested my corn, and then dropped off an egg for an animal bundle. I then went in and bought a few eggplant seeds, along with completing a mission for Marnie. That evening, I did a little work next to my crops area, and added some more paths. On day 76, I harvested some more corn, and then headed down to the beach, where I bought something very special. I then gave it to Leah while we both stood there in the pouring rain. On day 77, I completed the final bundle in the pantry and unlocked the greenhouse. I then spent the rest of the day getting to level 115 in the mines. On day 78, I spent some time redoing the layout of my farm buildings, along with having to completely rebuild my fence. I then added a few paths and some grass on the inside of it. Day 79 was the day I showed up to a wedding in jeans and a baseball hat. Wow, don't I look good. After the wedding, I went back and got to work harvesting my corn. I spent the rest of the afternoon turning my corn into corn seeds, as I discovered that the corn seeds sell for 75 gold, and each piece of corn can make up to 3 packs of seeds. So that's why I made so many seed makers. I even got lucky and somehow got an ancient seed out of one of them. On day 80, I harvested the other half of my corn, and then headed to Clint's to open a few geodes. I then headed into the mines and made it all the way to the bottom. Day 81, I got a dehydrator from Lewis, and then headed off to the desert to try my luck in the skull caverns. I ended up running into a dinosaur, and it even dropped an egg, which is pretty cool. On day 82, I headed down to the traveling cart and got lucky enough to purchase a red cabbage, which I immediately dropped off at the community center and completed the dye bundle. Honestly, the only other thing I did that day was process a few geodes and then added on a little bit to my furnace area. Day 83, Emily greeted me at the door and told me I could use her sewing machine, which I never will. But I guess thanks anyways. After she left, I harvested my corn and the pumpkins that had grown. I then headed over to the barn and noticed that my pig had found me a truffle. I then completely finished my furnace area and then headed into town for the Spirits Eve Festival. Day 84 was the final day of fall. So I got to work harvesting all of my corn and pumpkins and then headed to the community center to complete the chef's bundle. I then planted a few more crops in my greenhouse before heading to bed and saying goodnight to fall. On the first day of winter, I got to work planting some powder melon seeds that I had randomly found. Apparently, they only grow in winter, so I thought I'd give them a shot. I then headed up to Robin's and purchased another house upgrade. After that, I went to the community center and completed the winter foraging bundle, which also was the last bundle in the crafts room. On day 86, I planted a bunch of winter seeds and then planted some wheat in my greenhouse. I then got a spyglass from some strange looking dude and then headed over to the quarry where I blew up a bunch of rocks. And then at the end of the day, I accidentally put a bunch of question marks on my wall. Day 87, I bought a few auto grabbers and an extra heater so as to keep the animals happy. I then headed over to the quarry and removed all the trees. I then went into a new cave and found a golden sight. Day 88, I dropped off my pickaxe to get it upgraded and then went to the Adventurers Guild and sold a bunch of weapons that I was never going to use. I then headed down to the beach where I spent the rest of the day fishing until I caught a squid. On day 89, I harvested some crops that had grown in the greenhouse and then headed over to Clint's to open a few geodes. After that, I went and purchased a windmill from Robin. On day 90, I planted a bunch of wheat seeds and then did a favor for Emily. I then headed over to Clint's to pick up my pickaxe and ended up dropping off my axe to get it upgraded as well. On day 89, I harvested some cranberries and then planted a few more powder melon seeds I'd found, along with adding a small path to the windmill. On day 92, I picked my first batch of powder melons and decided to turn them all back into seeds. I then headed down to the ice festival where I bought a very expensive tree and then proceeded to beat everyone at the ice fishing competition. On day 93, my winter seeds finally grew, and so I decided to turn them all into seeds and replant them as well. I then went and picked up my axe and then headed back home and started working on laying out some more paths and adding on to my tree farm. On day 94, the only thing of real significance that I did was buy an iridium rod from Willie, and then I spent the rest of the night fishing. Day 95, I harvested a few of the crops in my greenhouse and headed to Robin's to get a fish pond. Day 96, I headed down to the traveling cart and bought a rabbit's foot, and it just so happened to be the final item I needed to complete the community center. I then headed down to the beach where they were having a squid fishing competition where I was able to take home first place. On day 97, I headed into town and there was a big celebration at the community center. During the celebration, Pierre got into a fight with some guy named Morris and he ended up knocking him clear off the screen. After a wonderful time there, I headed back down to the beach where Willie showed me a bit of a crab problem he was having. On day 98, I harvested a few powder melons along with my wheat and a few grapes, and honestly just didn't really do a whole lot else that day. Day 99, most of my powder melons were ready and I ended up turning most of them back into seeds. I then completed a quest for the wizard, which he gave me 1,000 gold for. I then went into the sewers and bought a star fruit from some guy named Krobus. I then completed a quest for Emily and she also gave me 1,000 gold. I then headed up to Robin's and got another fish pond. After that, I headed down to the night market, and since there wasn't a whole lot going on there, I just ended up going home. On day 100, all of my winter seeds were ready. After harvesting them, I turned them all back into seeds. I then headed up to the lake to catch a few sturgeon for my fish ponds. On day 101, I spent the morning harvesting a bunch of crops that had grown in my greenhouse. I then headed down to the wizard and gave him a birthday gift. I then completed a quest for the wizard and ended up getting teleported to some strange area. I got out of there as quick as I came. On day 102, some of my powder melons were ready to be harvested, along with my wheat. I then headed into the mines to spend the rest of the day down there. Day 103, I spent the morning making some coffee, and then dropped off a few things at the museum. I then went and bought a cow, who I ended up naming Old Bessie, along with a chicken, which I named Sarah. I then headed to the desert, where I chopped down a few trees for wood and gathered a few other things. On day 104, I spent the morning harvesting a few different things, and then headed over to Clint's to break open a few geodes. I then dropped off my watering can to get it upgraded, and then headed to the desert to catch a scorpion carp for a mission I picked up. I then spent the rest of the day working on some more paths around the farm. On day 105, my sweet gem berries were ready to be picked, so I headed down to the secret forest. But on my way there, I stopped by the traveling cart and ended up buying a portrait of Leah for 30,000 gold. After that, I headed into the secret forest and got another star drop. I then headed up to Robin's, where I ended up getting another fish pond. On day 106, I spent the morning building some more dehydrators and then harvested my cranberries that had grown. I then went and picked up my watering can along with opening a few geodes. I then worked on adding some more paths and did some planning on where I wanted my fruit trees to go. On day 107, all of my winter seeds had grown, and I ended up just selling them all. I then bought a few fruit trees and then spent the rest of the day down in the mine. On day 108, I spent 18,000 gold on some more fruit trees and then headed over to Clint's to pick up my pan that I dropped off a few days before. I then went and spent some more time in the mines. Day 109 was the Feast of the Winter Star. I spent the morning doing some chores around the farm and then headed into town for the celebration. I ended up having Sebastian as my secret person. I ended up giving him some sashimi, which I think is how you pronounce that, which was apparently exactly what he wanted, so that was kind of convenient. After buying a few things, I headed home. On day 110, Willie showed me his old broken boat and asked if I could help him fix it. I didn't have any of the parts with me, but I said I'd be glad to help. After that, I spent the rest of the day down in the mines. On day 111, I harvested a bunch of cranberries and coffee beans. I then spent the rest of the day trying to catch an albacore for Gus, which I eventually did, and even ended up getting a treasure chest with it. Day 112 was the final day of winter, and well, the year. The first thing I did was head into the secret woods and have a conversation with a bear, who apparently just wanted some maple syrup. He seemed like a nice guy though. I then spent the afternoon planting fruit trees and working on making the farm look a little nicer. I had a few lights around the big pond and along some of the other paths, and with nothing else really left to do, I rang my bell a few more times before heading to bed and closing the door on my first year in Stardew Valley. So yeah, that was a year in Stardew Valley. For those of you who may be wondering, I'll give you a quick tour of what the farm looks like. So over here we have the different seed makers and like the dehydrators and stuff. Down here we have the whole crops area. Then we have the second crops area along with like the different fruit trees. Down here we have the different fish farms. Over here we got the tree farm. The ones over here, I planted them in winter and they just didn't grow. Here we have the animal farm. I mean, it's, you know, it's a farm. We got the greenhouse. Then we got the windmill. And then over here we got the different kegs and the preserve jars. Then we got the furnaces and different things. I figured eventually I'd probably add on over here, but I guess if I ever play another year of this or something, I could do that. And finally, we just kind of have this whole wide open area over here. Like I said at the beginning, this video took about 60 hours to make, so if you could leave a like and maybe even subscribe, that'd mean the world to me. Thank you for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Peace out.